Hello and welcome back. After the summer break, it's series 2 of the Road Hub International podcast. Today we're talking, it's the Thursday, just the end of August here, and it's kind of a red letter day, the 28th of August for Milestone, celebrating a pretty much of a landmark anniversary in the company's history. And with me today to talk about it are none other than Pat Sheedy, who's the CEO of Milestone, and Sébastien Moulin, who's the Chief Commercial Officer. So, gentlemen, thanks. I know it's been a busy morning and everything for you guys, talking about not just the anniversary, but a whole rebrand for the company. So, busy day. So, thanks for making a little window in your diary today to talk to us and the listeners. 15 years in the business. I mean, a lot of things have happened in the leasing market in the last 15 years. It's been just like the weather over the last week in Ireland and here in the UK. It's been kind of stormy.
Thank you, Gideon, and thanks for having us. Yes, it's certainly been a roller coaster, I would say, over the last 15 years that Milestone has been in business. I think we forget that prior to 2010, when Milestone was founded, there didn't really exist an operating lease model for helicopters at scale. They were the founders of the business were the first to provide capital in an operating lease type product at scale for the industry. And it coincided really at that point in time between 2010 and 2015 with huge growth. I mean, massive growth, particularly in offshore, as the new technology, large scale, heavy helicopters started to deliver from the OEMs, and we were looking at $25, $30 million helicopters suddenly requiring financing at scale. And I think, the boom years as they were between 2010 to 2015 was really where Milestone started to build its brand, and build its scale as market leader where we still sit today. Again, as I said, it was a roller coaster because that quickly turned on us around 2015 with the crisis in offshore oil and gas in particular, and we were in a position where we had large scale oversupply in the industry and a lot of stress. Between 2015 and 2020, we saw practically all the major operators file for Chapter 11. Some of our major competitors not make it either through that time frame. And then we swing back to phase 3, I think, of our life cycle, which was the AerCap acquisition of the business in 2021. And that coincided really with an upturn in the market as we saw, a recovery in offshore in particular, utilization of the fleet, significantly increase. And we're in a position today where I think, the market is in as good a place as it has been, certainly in the last part of the best part of the last decade. And I think at that point in time, we've looked back over those 15 years of our life and decided, now is the time to take stock and really look at ourselves and our brand and what we stand for. And that's partially behind the relaunch of the brand and the refresh of the brand that you've seen today.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about that, I was interesting, especially given the background of explosive growth, a crunch in the market, as you just described especially in the offshore energy support sector, and then there's almost like recovery, renaissance, but a much more, and here comes the word, measured approach to the recovery, and you're not seeing the order bundles or anything like that. So I guess that links into a little bit the tagline you guys have come up with the rebrand, the get the measure.
Exactly. Good afternoon to everyone. And yes, you nailed it exactly right. Look, I think if you look at the tagline of Milestone since inception, as Pat described it, they used to be first and rising higher, which I think reflected at that time pretty well, what was the ambition for the business and the market we're in. Today, it's all about, leading with intelligence, and, keeping that leadership means being measured, showing the standard, and actually trying to, while pushing the boundaries, doing the right thing for our industry. We used to place speculative orders and looking at scale and making sure that, we're ahead of everyone else. I think today we just have to lead differently by, providing financing and capital where it makes sense. And that means, also walking through the transition of the assets in some of the segment, in particular oil and gas, in particular with the heavies and the 92 that is, coming close to the end of its primary mission. And there are multiple steps we are going through. One, financing the transition and the new technology. Second, financing the development of the secondary missions. And we've seen it, we've done it over the last couple of years, first with the 225 and now with the 92, where we pay and develop some of the equipment that will serve some of the other segments like firefighting. And we've seen a number of 92s starting those operations, last year and this year even more. So I think, be the measure is what we're going to be going forward using for the next few years.
Let's just think about that, and I guess initially we'll be talking a little bit about those first life applications still in the offshore sector. As we've seen this kind of transition away from the heavies, obviously 225 still a swear word in the North Sea, but people are turning it also away from the S92s now. As they come bumping up against that, the 20-year limits on the first life for the offshore energy support guys, and also let's face it, those issues with lifing out in gearboxes and support side of that, and still, even though Leon Silva will tell us it's coming soon, no sign of a restart of production either for the 92s. Is it really, do you think that's sort of end of the road for the first life? Certainly, we'll come and talk about second life later on, but
I think it's important to look when you look at the market and all those different contracts and different regions. Yes, I think if you ask anyone, they all see the transitions, happening. Everyone would have liked to see and to get the new technology. That's a natural step, I guess. But over the last couple of years, first, Sikorsky has improved massively the support. I think after COVID, they definitely got caught by, the rise back in demand and the hours that didn't really fall on the use of the aircraft. So there was a need for more support and investment on that front, which they have done. And now we can see that, look, with more super medium coming into play and flying a lot of hours too, the first conclusion is like, look, there is no super medium that can replace the 92 1-for-1. That's just a reality. You need minimum, 1.5 to 2 super medium to support the 92. The entire fleet of 92 oil and gas is currently flying today, right? Despite the need or the will to see new technology coming in, the reality is like the 92 is delivering every day, every night for across the world for the energy segment. So the transition will happen. There is no question. But I think, look, we see also maintenance coming into play. The 175 and the 189 are hitting some of those thresholds, flying, a lot of hours per year. They need maintenance. They need downtime to be maintained as well. So what we expect is, over the next 5 years, the transitions is going to continue, but the 92 is going to be still the predominant aircraft on that segment. And then, by 2030, yes, you will accelerate probably the transition of the 92. And then the question comes of the 525. I mean, the timing has been against Bell for a long time. They missed the first boat, but now they are in a position of, if they certify that aircraft with the performance that they are presenting to us and to the market, it looks like they could be a better platform to replace 1-for-1 on the 92 in some of the missions in some of the regions. So I think, look, there is a lot of things to happen over the next few years, and certainly we're here to stay and to continue leading by, being measured, but investing and deploying our capital.
Yeah, I think just to follow up on that, Gideon, I mean, the reality is you still have almost 200 S92s flying out there in offshore oil and gas and in energy. And although we see the super mediums replacement starting, production from the OEMs is pretty measured as well to continue the theme. You've across the two, Airbus and Leonardo, first half of 2025, you've had about 10 units delivered, right? So this is, even if that ramps up significantly through 26, 27, 28, it's still a long time before, they displace the 200 odd units that are out there in terms of S92s. And I think that's why the timeline Seb discussed, there is going to be S92s as probably still as the backbone of the offshore fleet out until the end of this decade. And I think potentially after that, you see an acceleration in retirements or retirements of aircraft and transitions of aircraft into secondary missions, but there's still life in the old dog yet, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, but it always comes back. It comes back to the thing. There are certain missions that no super medium can do, right? I mean, you're going to need the range of a 92 or a 225, and that's that. The physics is there. It's a simple thing.
And there is a relatively young part of that fleet still there. If you think about what I discussed in terms of Milestone's ramp up in its initial phases, a lot of those aircraft were bought new from Sikorsky in 2012, 13, 14. Those aircraft are still 11, 12, 13 years old. Yeah, even against an arbitrary 20-year cutoff, they've still 6 or 7 or 8 years of good primary mission life left in them, as long as the product is supported. Sure. And I think what we've seen from Sikorsky over the last 18 months in particular is, after a very stuttery start coming out of COVID, when flight hours just went up at a scale that they were not expecting and they just could not support, they have made progress. I don't think it's perfect yet. I don't think even Leon will say it's perfect yet, but they certainly have made progress. And I think what we've seen, even discussions with not just our operators, with the oil company and users, while initially there may have been a reaction to say we are way overexposed to the 92, we've got to transition to super mediums ASAP. Now there seems to be more of a consensus that a balanced fleet, a mixed fleet for a while, may not be a bad option. And that's what we're seeing, particularly, I think, in Norway and the North Sea.
Yeah, worth highlighting. I think we expect one IFP coming out of the UK in the coming weeks that is going to move back from a full super medium fleet to actually a mix of super medium and heavy. And I think that's exactly what highlighted here. It's just finding the right balance, just not overexposing yourself to one product and one OEM. Just makes sense. Makes sense for the operators, makes sense for the end users, and certainly makes sense for us too. So
and you're spreading risk, right, as well at the same time. If you're all the eggs are in one type basket, and heaven forfend something happens and a type is grounded. We've seen it before, let's face it. That there's an awful lot of risk attached to a single type solution. It's obvious, I guess. But let's think about let's just step away from energy for the moment and start thinking about. And again, this kind of does segue a little bit into missions where you do see super mediums. You see, here in the UK and increasingly in your part of the world, you're seeing the AW189 being the backbone of the SAR provision as an element too, So you see those demands on that relatively low rate of production from the OEMs for people looking at 189s, especially 175s. I know Airbus are pushing the SAR capabilities there, but even so, as you say, they're not building vast numbers of aircraft, and those segments are looking for capability as well.
I think that's right, and that's before we even discuss what happens on military production lines and how much capacity may have to go down there, given the push to rearm Europe. So, yeah, I think we're confident that, as Sébastien outlined, the transition away from the 92 is happening and will continue to happen. But I do think it will be at a reasonably measured pace. The OEMs are constrained not just by the factors you outlined, which are a requirement for aircraft in different missions, whether that be SAR or defense, but also by engine OEMs, which are having their own production difficulties, and they're just not capable of ramping up at scale to increase production to meet the OEM requirements, even if they wanted to. So I do think there are production constraints there across the board, which will mean, regardless of where demand comes from, supply is going to remain constrained, I think, at least over the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be that stasis, that event horizon about, the engine OEMs, and I guess, they're balancing new aircraft provision and support of existing fleet, a growing existing fleet, and how do they support the product out there as well as add to it. But I know from conversations I've had with the president of a certain OEM that should remain nameless, that their current only turbine, the production rate is determined exactly by how fast the engine maker can build the engines for them.
Yep.
And for the other OEMs that the engine maker supplies as well. So I guess that those constraints. It is this interdependency thing. But let's think about your activities in those mission critical segments like EMS, like SAR, and how do you see those elements develop, especially as we've talked about the defense element that could move all the chairs on the game of musical chairs. You only have to ask somebody who's after a 145 what happened to their production position after the Bundeswehr order. But parking that aside, let's think about those. What types do you see are going to be staying top of the pops in those sectors?
So I think, look, it's a very good question, and the segment, both search and rescue and EMS in general, have been very good segments, right? So long-term contract, usually much longer term than the standard oil and gas contract. You're looking at 7 to 10 years. But I think one of the key elements as well that we tend to forget, and 15 years in this business is actually giving us some lessons, even on those segments that look very rosy from outside. The reality is, like, you're looking at a very highly spec'd aircraft. And when you need to transition those aircraft from one mission to another or from one region to another, you're facing heavy reconfigurations, long lead time, service built in from the OEMs that are not developed and that you need to finance and that you need to wait for. So where we actually still very much like those segments and we're still the leading lessor in those space, we're also still very careful with the underlying contract itself and working with the OEM, trying to develop as much as possible plug and play solutions where we can have the right provision at the start and just avoid those potential risk in having the aircraft on the ground for a long time at the time of transitions, because those months that you lose are gone forever. Like, you will never recover those rent, and that affects our return and our business plan. So I think, look, still a lot to do in that segment, and especially like some of the medium aircraft and the light wing. We've been deploying quite a few of them, but we also being careful on how we finance them and how we spec them at the start.
Yeah, I think spec is key. As Seb said, 15 years in this business, we've learned a few lessons. One of them is, when the aircraft is 8 years of age, that's the wrong time to figure out that you're missing some provisions that you need. You've got to do it day one, and you've got to have the aircraft spec'd right day one, because that's when you lose money. That's when we figured out that transitioning aircraft or trying to retrofit aircraft that far into its life cycle is very, very difficult and very, very costly. But we learned those lessons, and we've got milestone baseline specs really coming off the production lines from all the OEMs now, where I think we believe we've got a spec that assists us in managing those transitions over time.
And what is important is it's not a theoretical need, right? So I think at the start of the business and when Milestone was written, the business model was very much like those aircraft are sticky and they will never come back from those missions. But the reality is they do come back.
They do come back.
I can tell you, after 10 years, like, the Italian regional government wants to see a new aircraft coming in, and you're going to have to take it back, or the operators will have to find work for it somewhere else. But that means potential downtime, requests for financing of new equipment to make it, to upgrade it to the new requirements wherever it goes. So I think that's key for anyone looking at that space. This is just something you have to take into account when you make your investment case.
Let's just conclude our conversation, because I'm mindful that the sands of time are running on us, and I want to get back to something we touched on earlier and talking about that second life, and in specific the work you've been doing with the 92s, and I'm thinking obviously of the aerial firefighting capability and expansion of that message. I mean, look, as we sit here and talk today, great gobs of Southern Europe are on fire. Great gobs of North America are on fire. Even most of the North Yorkshire moors are on fire. It's that level of expansion in the requirement there. Let's just talk about that a little while.
Yeah, no, look, unfortunately, as you describe it, that's just the reality of the world we live in today. And we've seen, increase in firefighting requirements everywhere. And when we look at the 92 and the capabilities of that aircraft, I think that's something we saw and we identified. We developed and certified the Helitac tank, last year after 18 months of work and $1.5 million of investment. We got it certified and it started operation in Canada last year. And I think on the first year, it did about, a bit less than 100 hours and something around, 500 water drops. But this year, VIH, and very thankful for VIH and the partnership we have with them, as well as Helitac, obviously, and Sikorsky. But they've invested themselves in a tank. So they put a second aircraft into operation in Canada. And I think as of the 18th of August, we had reached 695 flight hours across the two aircraft and close to 6,000 water drops. So for us, it's a real testament that we are investing in the right equipment, in the right transition for the assets as well. And hopefully we want to continue serving all those segments and in particular the firefighting segment.
It is one of those things. It's great to see something, with still, let's face it, a lot of life when you get away from those arbitrary life limits, an aircraft with a lot of life left in it and a lot of capability to put large quantities of water on a fire. Let's not get away from that. That's the thing that's going to turn a fire away from someone's house or a town or whatever it is. We see that kind of thing all the time. Guys, it's been great sharing some time with you today. As always, the sands of time have beaten us. I'm sure we could chat for hours more about lessons learned and how getting the measure has developed over the last 15 years for you guys. So that has been episode 1 of the second series of the Road Hub International podcast. My guests today have been Pat Sheedy and Sébastien Moulin from Milestone Aviation, getting the measure, as they have done for the last 15 years. Now, you can join us again in 2 weeks' time when I'll be talking all about LifeSeeker. Until that time, take care of yourselves, keep the blue side up, fly safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.